You know, the US presidency is one of the most powerful jobs on the planet, and the original rulebook for it was the Constitution. But what happens when those rules need, well, an update? Today we're going to dive into the key amendments that have completely reshaped the American presidency.
So you gotta ask, has the president's job always been the same? The short answer? Absolutely not. Over the centuries, the United States has actually gone in and formally changed its own rulebook, not just to tweak how we elect a president, but to alter the very nature of the office itself.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with the framers' original blueprint. Then we'll see how the election rules got fixed, how the job itself was redefined, and finally, what all this tells us about the presidency today.
To really get a handle on the changes, we have to start at the very beginning. So let's jump back in time and look at the original plan the framers of the Constitution actually put in place.
So the framers were a little wary of pure, direct democracy. They came up with this compromise, the Electoral College. What this system does is make sure the president isn't just chosen by a single national popular vote, but through a state-by-state contest. It's all about balancing the power between the big states and the smaller ones.
So how do they calculate those all-important votes? Well, the formula is actually pretty straightforward. It ties a state's electoral power directly to its power in Congress. You just take its number of representatives in the House, that's based on population, and add its 2 senators. Simple as that.
Okay, now the original process was, let's just say, radically different. Get this, electors cast 2 votes, and both were for president. The person with the most votes got the top job, and the runner-up became vice president. I mean, can you imagine having your biggest political rival as your second in command? That was a real recipe for conflict.
And yeah, those problems really demanded a fix. The solution? It came in the form of constitutional amendments that were designed to give the whole system an overhaul.
That old system, it was just chaos waiting to happen. It led to weird electoral ties and forced political opponents to try and work together in the same administration. Then came the 12th Amendment, which brought some sanity to the process by creating 2 separate ballots, one for president and one for vice president. That's what ended the whole runner-up system for good.
So that fixed one major headache. But it left another question hanging out there. What about American citizens who don't actually live in a state? For a very long time, the people living right in the nation's capital had 0 say in who became president.
That all changed with the 23rd Amendment back in 1961. This formally gave the citizens of Washington, D.C. a voice by giving the district its own electoral votes. And to keep it fair, it said D.C. would get the same number of votes as the state with the smallest population.
And that number has always been 3. Just 3 votes. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but believe me, as a step forward for representation, it was absolutely monumental.
But changing how we elect a president was only half the story. Other amendments went even deeper, reshaping the very nature of the job itself.
2 major changes really stand out here. First, the establishment of presidential term limits. And second, the creation of crystal-clear rules for presidential succession and, what happens if a president becomes disabled while in office.
Let's start with the 22nd Amendment. For over 150 years, presidents serving only 2 terms wasn't a law, it was just a tradition that George Washington started. But after Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected to an incredible 4 terms, Congress decided it was time to make that tradition official, constitutional law.
And the new rule was simple and direct. A president is limited to just 2 full terms in office. Period.
Next up is the 25th Amendment, which came about after the assassination of JFK. This amendment is so critical for keeping the government stable. It clarifies the line of succession, and for the very first time, it created a formal process for what to do when a president is alive, but incapacitated and unable to perform their duties.
So, what's the big takeaway here? We've gone through all these changes. What does it all really mean? Let's put it all together.
When you step back, it's pretty clear that the presidency is not some static institution that's frozen in time. The Constitution's amendment process has shown itself to be this vital tool, allowing the office to evolve, to fix flaws in its original design, and to adapt to challenges the founders could have never imagined.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about for the future. We've seen the Constitution change before to alter the presidency, so you have to wonder, what change could be next?